Okay. So still talking about twilight, how to define the time of twilight. And for most of today, we're going to be talking about two distinct opinions about the length of twilight. But it's really two very different approaches to halachically what twilight would be. So twilight is that in-between time. It's not night, it's not day. And if you want to look on 161, I'm not going to go through the whole thing again, but Rabbi Yehuda. So Rabbi Yehuda, who is a different person than Rav Yehuda. Of course, Yehuda was a common name. Rav, if you have Rav in front of your name, which also means rabbi, Rabbi also means, because I don't know if people know this, but Rav meant that they lived later. So a Rabbi was someone who lived earlier, and they called them Rabbi in those days. Later in Babylonia, they would call the rabbis Rav. So if you see Rav in front of a name, it means that the person lived later and was probably also living in Babylonia. Although to complicate things, you couldn't actually get rabbinic ordination in Babylonia. So there were a lot of smart people like Shmuel who never got rabbinic ordination because he didn't live in Israel. He only lived in Babylonia. Anyway, so Rabbi Yehuda had changed the subject. So Rabbi Yehuda, if you remember, he has an extended time that's twilight. He talks about the sky being pink, and you measure how pink the sky is and where the sun is setting, and it, I don't know, call it half hour. Remember, they didn't use units of time. He actually used the unit of distance to measure it, the time it takes from you to walk down a mountain and go into the sea. Let's say half hour, 45 minutes. There's a distinct time for twilight. But if you remember, Rabbi Yossi says it doesn't really exist. He says, Ben Hashmasha Keheraf Ayin, that twilight is a single instant that you can't measure. So for halakhic purposes then, right, for practical purpose, it doesn't really exist. It's day, then it's night. Right? Whereas for Rabbi Yehuda, there actually is a period which is neither day nor night, which means that the laws would be complicated, or it wouldn't be clear. But Rabbi Yossi actually says it's absolutely clear. It's either night or it's day. There's no in-between. Okay, is that clear? So Rabbi Yehuda says it's a distinct period, maybe 45 minutes, as it becomes dark. And Rabbi Yossi says, no, it's either day or night. All right. Now I'm on page 163. This is where we left off, second paragraph. Amar Rav Yehuda, different guy. So Rav Yehuda as opposed to Rabbi Yehuda says, Amar Shmuel, in the name of Shmuel. Bein Hashmashat de Rabbi Yehuda, Kohanim Tov Limbo. Now he just makes a statement. So the twilight that Rabbi Yehuda, the other Yehuda, the Rabbi Yehuda, is in other words the one that has a distinct length of time, priests may immerse during that time. Okay, so what does this mean? Remember that this also affects loss of purity. So if you're a priest, let's say, and the temple is extant, which is not, but if there was a temple, and you acquire impurity, you have to take care of that. Now, what does impurity mean? There's all sorts of ways to acquire impurity. You could be in the presence of a dead body. There could be a nightly emission, one way or another. You acquire impurity. So what do when you acquire impurity? You go to the mikveh. You go to the mikveh that day. Take care of it that day, during the day. You don't do it at night. You go during the mikveh during the day. And then when you come out of the mikveh, you are pure. And for a Kohen, it's actually very important to be pure, not just to do the work in the temple, but because, very simple reason, the Kohen can't eat until the Kohen's pure, because the Kohen is only allowed to eat truma. Truma is dedicated food. It's food that the rest of the community dedicates to the priests. It's sacred, it's holy, and the priest is not allowed to touch it because it's sacred and holy if he's in a state of impurity. In other words, he can't eat until he's pure. So you know that he's going to take care of it. And he's also going to avoid impurity, because it means he can't eat until he's pure again. All right, so you have to immerse yourself while it's day. What if you immerse yourself when it's twilight? All right, it's not day, it's not night. Okay, so what Shmuel is suggesting is that Rabbi Yehuda says, that's okay, you can do it. You're supposed to immerse during the day, but we're going to count twilight. We're going to count twilight then as day, or for him, you can also immerse during twilight. Are we clear about this? Okay, lots going on here. All right, now he says Liman. So who is that? Now he's saying that's according to Rabbi Yehuda, but he wants to know who made that ruling. In other words, who made the ruling that we follow Rabbi Yehuda's system of twilight for a priest who is immersing? Okay, stay with me. Ilaim ala Rabbi Yehuda. Now, if it was Rabbi Yehuda that made the ruling, the problem with that is Rabbi Yehuda in a different place, which we studied, says Sfeikahu. Okay, so Rabbi Yehuda defined twilight as a period of uncertainty, and he also said for laws of the Torah, when there's uncertainty, you always rule the strictest ruling. And the strictest ruling would be twilight is nighttime. And if you immerse yourself during twilight, it doesn't count. So you're not allowed to eat. So this can't be according to Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda defines doubtful, uncertain areas in the law as always the stricter interpretation. And so the stricter interpretation would be that you can't eat. It doesn't count as a real halachic immersion. Is that clear? Okay. Ella, so it must not be according to Rabbi Yehuda, but still somebody said it. Ella ben hashmashot to Rabbi Yehuda. All right, so what it is it's a hybrid. It's Rabbi Yehuda's definition of twilight, which has a length. For convenience sake, I'm saying 40 minutes right now, but he doesn't actually identify it in units of time. But it has a length. But Rabbi Yossi, Kohanim Tovlim Bo. But Rabbi Yossi says that it counts. And it's Rabbi Yossi's halachic ruling. Now, if you remember, this makes sense, because Rabbi Yossi says, in fact, there is no time period that we call twilight. It's either night or day. So if it's becoming dark, what we're saying right now is Rabbi Yossi would say that's daytime. And so you immersed in daytime, so it's fine. What we've never had from Rabbi Yossi is a definition. How do you know when it's night? How do you know when it's day? All we have from him is there's no in-between time. But it would be useful for him to know, okay, so when's it dark? When's it day? When's it night? When's it day? Now, some of us might think, okay, the halacha actually does have some thoughts about this, like the appearance of stars. 1, 2, 3 stars, something like that, which we're going to get to, I think, today. But right now, we don't have an opinion from Rabbi Yossi about when exactly we know that it's dark. What we do have is an opinion that there's no such thing as twilight. And if a priest immerses during what you might think of as twilight, for me that's day, and that counts. Dark is dark. Any questions about this?
It's confusing.
Is it? Well, that's the way I explained it. But
according to Rabbi Yehuda, then it's Pekat. It's according to Rabbi Yossi, it's kosher.
Yeah. All right, so the thing is that it's assuming that Rabbi Yossi, and you'll see this for a second, it's assuming that Rabbi Yossi actually has a definition of what you might think is twilight, where it's getting dark. It's not dark, it's not day. You might think it's dark, but he's defining it not as twilight, but still as day. Okay? So he's saying during the kind of in-between period, which you consider twilight, Rabbi Yehuda considers twilight, I don't think of that as twilight at all. I think of that as day. That's what Rabbi Yossi is saying. So therefore, of course, the priest can immerse during that time, because it's not night yet. It's still day. Yeah.
At the other end, before sunrise, there's a period where there's light in the sky.
Right.
So is there a same kind of a problem as when day begins?
Not really, because
it only affects Shabbat.
No, you're right. No, there would be. There is. There's an issue. They talk about different places. It's less important in the halacha because, the day always starts the night before.
Right.
But there are issues. For instance, like you immerse during the day, like when the sun's out. So you have to know when the day is. It's most important for prayer, because when do you say shacharit?
Right.
So shacharit's the morning prayer. So you're not supposed to say shacharit when it's dark.
Right.
So how do you define when the day starts?
Right.
So there are discussions about that.
Okay,
and it's a similar discussion.
Kind of
Yeah, but what they don't have is interesting. They don't have like an in between period in the halacha for day. No rabbi has that. So there is a disagreement about when morning starts, like when you see the first sort of rays of sun, or when it's like a little bit more in the sky. That's morning. Then you can say your morning prayers. But there's nothing like, that's an in between time. The in between time only exists between day and night.
Right. Well, actually, it's interesting because we don't really have a word.
Yeah, we don't.
That period of time either.
Isn't that interesting? We don't.
The light is out, but
That's
the sun
right.
isn't up yet.
Right. Sunrise. Dawn.
But the sun. Well,
dawn really indicates it's a new day.
It's
a new dawn. You say a new dawn.
I thought dawn was the equivalent of twilight.
I don't think so, though.
I
I think twilight is weird. I don't know what's going on. Dawn it's morning. Hey, I'm feeling good. Yeah. So it's interesting. So it's a multicultural thing, right? That twilight.
Okay,
I mean, why are those books called Twilight? About the vampires, because it's weird and scary and mysterious, and we don't know how to define it. And whereas Dawn, well, actually, one of those books is called Dawn. You're coming out of it. Dawn is distinct. It's a new day.
So
Turning the page, it's dawn.
Right.
Yeah.
maybe it's too soon to bring this up. Today, we don't have to rely on these things because we have GPS,
Yes.
we have
Yeah, I know.
timetables, and
Yeah.
and so what do we use today?
Clocks.
It's when the sun breaks the
But, I
horizon
mean-
either way, right? Is
But
that the-
I mean, the clock.
Now, we use these halakhic definitions. Somebody then, it very conveniently does the work for us and says Shabbat starts at 7:37 and 26 seconds. I mean, somebody actually looks it up, but we don't rely on the, which I think is, and I've said before, this is a real loss to us, because really the whole notion of Shabbat is supposed to bring us into rhythms of nature. So, and you'll see as it goes through, every time the Talmud asks the question, when do I know when Shabbat starts, or when do I know the next day starts? Every answer is, well, here's what you should see in the sky. Here's how you experience it. Whereas nowadays we look at our watches, and I think we really miss something. We're not in any way as in touch with nature. And I think they knew about timekeeping in those days, much less than we did. But I think they were trying to keep us in cycles with nature. It's what the sun is doing. It's what the moon and the stars are doing. That's what matters to us. That's what should matter to us. So we're part of nature. We're not separate and alienated.
Put things in perspective. Just maybe 200 years ago, in a major city like New York City or Paris, you could probably see the Milky Way.
Yeah, that's right, of course.
Now
right.
It's something you see in a book.
Yeah. Although I will say that they had clouds in those days. They had clouds, they had rain, they had fog.
Assuming a clear day.
Yeah, I know. So, but we're actually we're going to get to something, I think, where it talks about what if it's cloudy. What do you do when it's cloudy? So let me keep going. All right, Pshita Mahudatema. So it says, well, it's obvious that for Rabbi Yossi, so it's obvious for Rabbi Yossi that you could immerse yourself halachically during twilight, because he doesn't even have the definition of twilight. So it's obvious if it's still day that counts. So why are you even telling us that according to Yossi, during twilight it's okay to immerse yourself? Because we already could figure that out on our own. So now it's Benash Mashot to Rabbi Yossi. So you might think, Ma'udatema means you might think that for Rabbi Yossi, Meshach Shayach bid Rabbi Yehuda. You might think that, so again, I said before, so Rabbi Yossi is aware that there is this in-between time. It's just that he doesn't classify it as twilight. He classifies it as day. So you might think his definition of this twilight time, this in-between time, is actually the same as Rabbi Yehuda. The fact is it's not. Kamash Malan. So it teaches us to Shalem Benish Mashot to Rabbi Yehuda. So when Rabbi Yehuda has his own definition of twilight, when that's done, V'hadar Matchil Benish Mashot to Rabbi Yossi. When that's done, according to Rabbi Yossi, there's still a little bit of time, which we would call twilight time, which Rabbi Yossi would say is still day. So the fact is, for Rabbi Yossi, it's just there's a longer day. There's a longer day. For him, it's really not dark until it's dark, which maybe we'll say for our own purposes here, because we're going to get to it, is when the stars come out. So that's very interesting, because for Rabbi Yossi, then Shabbat wouldn't start until the stars come out, because he doesn't accept the whole thing of twilight. The reason that we start Shabbat early is because we've embraced this definition of twilight, and we say, for twilight we are stricter, so we're going to start Shabbat just as the sun starts to set. That's when we're going to start Shabbat. Rabbi Yossi would say, no, it's either day or it's night, and until it's dark, it's Friday. It's not Shabbos until it's dark.
It makes more sense.
Well, I don't know if it does or not. I mean,
Depends on, dark is relative.
yeah, dark is relative. Yeah. So he's trying to find like a period of time where no one would argue it is dark now. And remember, I mean, it's not like he's not looking at the sky. He understands that there are transition times, but he's saying for the purposes of the law, it's either day or night.
So we're really bending the law then for when we have our services on Shabbat,
sure.
Friday night.
When it's after dark.
Light, when it's still
No,
light.
when it's-
No,
in the
well,
summertime when
we go both ways. I mean, we have a set period for Shabbat. We have a set period for our services. Sometimes it's still light out. Sometimes it's dark
That's what I'm
out.
saying. So we're bending it.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, you're always allowed to pray those particular prayers. It doesn't have to be light or dark to pray those particular prayers. There's certain things that you can't do if they're dark, like light the Shabbat candles. Mm-hmm. You can light them beforehand, but you can't light them afterwards. So we don't do that. We don't light the Shabbat candles if Shabbat started already. We always light it before. Okay, let's go on. Amar, so I'm on the fourth paragraph on page 162. Amar Rabba Bar Chana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. So Rabba Bar Chana said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Halacha ki Rabbi Yehuda linyan Shabbat. So it says that we follow Rabbi Yehuda, the halacha, for Shabbat, which is something I just said. Remember, Rabbi Yehuda has a distinct time, that's twilight. We follow him for the laws of Shabbat. And remember also, Rabbi Yehuda says the twilight period you always rule to the stricter, so that's why we start Shabbat early. We know that because we're following Rabbi Yehuda, okay? But it says, Halacha ki Rabbi Yossi le'inyan Truma. So when it comes time for Truma, which is the priest food, priest eating food, then we follow Rabbi Yossi, who doesn't have the twilight at all. It's either day or night. Okay, that's interesting. So it's weird anyway that we would classify twilight two different ways according to what law. It makes more sense that we would be more consistent. But we'll see. They analyze this a bit. Bishlama halacha ke Rabbi Yehuda linyan Shabbat. Okay, I understand that we would follow the halacha for Rabbi Yehuda when it comes to Shabbat. L'chumra. Because he says that we go stricter, and so for Shabbat, and by the way, the principle that you go according to the stricter interpretation on twilight, and I know I'm confusing things here, but it only applies to Torah laws. Remember, there's two types of laws. There's Torah laws and rabbinic laws. For rabbinic laws, you can be more lenient, less strict. But Shabbat is very clearly a Torah law. It's right there in the Torah. So the twilight time, ben hashmashot, which is uncertain, so therefore we go according to strict interpretations because we want to make sure we're following the Torah. So we go according to the stricter interpretation. Now, the thing is, the priest not eating truma, believe it or not, or
you know who wrote it.
No. So the truma thing, there's two things about truma, and it's important for me to point this out. So there's two things. One is that a priest that becomes impure has to immerse himself in a mikvah, right? And can't be pure until he comes out of the mikvah. That's one law. The other law is the priest can't eat the truma until he's pure, okay? And also can't eat truma until it's night. All right? So we've got two things we have to think about. One is, when is he allowed to go in the mikvah? And two is, when is he allowed to eat? It's very clear he can't eat until it's night.
Why isn't he allowed to eat until night?
Because here the Torah says he is impure until night. Ad laila. It actually uses the word laila in the Torah.
Oh, whether
Even
he's
if he
pure or
bathes.
not, he's...
Right, no, the bathing purifies him, but he's still impure until night. So it acts retroactively. So by the way, if you're a priest, and this makes some sense too, and you're impure, you're probably not going to go to the mikveh until very shortly before it gets dark, because there's always the possibility you'll get impure again, and then you have to do it again. So if you could conceivably go first thing in the morning, but the thing is, you're still impure until night. The impurity lasts until night. So two things have to happen. You have to go to the mikveh, and it has to become dark. So you might as well wait until towards the very end. But if you wait too long, then it doesn't count, because you can only go in the mikveh during the day.
But not being able to eat until night only applies if he is impure.
Oh yeah, of course. Otherwise, they eat. Right,
okay.
right. Yeah, it's not like they fast all the time.
No.
Because the only food they eat is the truma.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the only food?
That's the only food?
Snack a little bit?
No, they got storehouses of it. No, they've got.
Gosh, is not
It's by definition, a priest can only eat truma. But what does truma mean? It's just it's not like the food is different. It doesn't taste any different. It's taxation. It's like when the government spends our money. There's nothing different about the money. It's just that it comes from us. So the food for the truma comes from the people.
Yeah, but at lunchtime he eats truma.
Of course. No, lunch, breakfast.
He eats truma all the time.
That's all he eats.
So but if he's impure,
He can't eat. That's a problem.
No,
That's why he wants to avoid being impure.
Does that mean Kohanim can't cook their own food?
No, of course. Why can't they cook their own
They
food?
take a
It's
lot
just
of
donated.
times.
What?
Oh, it's donated uncooked. Okay.
Yeah.
So if he's impure at lunchtime, he can't eat lunch.
He can't eat lunch. It's an incentive to stay away from impurity.
You gotta stay pure.
Yeah.
But he can't immerse
Also-
himself after dark. on
Also,
Shabbat.
nobody
Well, he
else
could immerse himself, but if he gets impure again,
He'd have to do it again.
He can't, he can't
He'd have to
immerse
do it
himself
again. I mean, it's
after
just-
dark on Shabbat.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, that's the
You
rule.
can't ever immerse yourself during. You have to immerse yourself during the day.
Means the priest has to-
Don't argue with me about that, because it wasn't my idea. It's in the Torah. That's what it says. The Torah actually does say you have to immerse yourself. Yes.
He may have had it go.
Only priests can eat truma.
In other words,
No, he probably had it go.
if we were sitting down with a meal and the priest is there, he has to eat his own.
His
food.
servant would have to serve us non-truma food. The exception is if you marry into a priest family, the wife, obviously, of a Kohen, the wife of a priest, can eat truma.
So
They all use the same mikveh? Is there one
Can.
Oh, no.
one mikveh town, or?
No. Mikvahs. Apparently, there were mikvahs all over the place. Plus,
like a one-horse town?
plus any natural body of water. Any natural body of water is also a
Oh, it
mikvah.
doesn't have to.
Doesn't have to be salt?
Yeah, the ocean.
No, any natural body by definition is a mikvah.
So a priest couldn't have a dinner party?
Yeah.
So
The priest could have a dinner party, but
they couldn't eat his food.
no, he'd have to serve non-truma food to his guests. It's not like he's not allowed to have non-truma food in his. He just can't eat it. He's got to make sure it's separate. So I'm assuming they had communal meals where they would serve, just.
I was just thinking, though, having visited a medieval town in Germany where they had the old mikveh you could go see.
Right.
And it looked like it was pretty hard to come by. It was a well way underground, and you had to go downstairs.
Yeah, remember, all this only applies when the temple is standing. So in the medieval town in Germany, the priest, there wouldn't have been a set of priests. This is about priests who serve the temple in Jerusalem. So that's what it's about. And by the way, these are rabbis in Babylonia that are having this discussion. So this isn't part of their reality either. Yes, but it's speedily in our day. We will rebuild the temple, and we're studying his laws, so we'll know exactly what to do when that happens. That's sort of the point.
But didn't they have mikvahs in Babylon?
They had them because there's other reasons they have mikvahs. Yeah, but obviously during times of the temple, one of the main purposes of the mikvah were for the priests, because this stuff would happen. The seminal emissions and being in touch with dead bodies, and there's all sorts of things that could make you impure. So you need to have the mikvahs. We have very little evidence of how this actually worked, because these are rabbis in Babylonia that are discussing it, and it's already 500 years after the destruction of the temple, and they weren't around. They have some oral memories of it, but so we have very little idea of how it actually worked. I think according to a lot of the archaeology, there were lots of mikvahs. There seemed to be mikvahs all over Jerusalem.
In one of the excavations in Jerusalem, they found the mikvah.
Yeah, Masada. Masada, they had lots of mikvahs. And, there was water was hard to come by in Masada, but they had several mikvahs in Masada. Okay.
Or rebirth?
Well, it's got similar elements to baptism. I don't know if it's which comes first. You have the idea of immersing in water in the Torah, so in the Bible. And then, of course, it becomes important for Jesus' ministry, too, where he's purifying people, and that becomes baptism. The purposes are different. It'd be complicated to go into it right now. Yeah, but obviously, purification through water, ritual purification, is something that's, I think, you have it in Eastern religions, too.
Right.
Yeah.
Indian, right.
Yeah, it's very important still in India.
John the Baptist was
John the
a Judean,
Baptist.
was he not?
He was what?
A Judean.
Of course, yeah.
So he was,
Okay.
The guy that ran the mikveh.
Yeah, that's right. He was the mikvah lady. John the Baptist. Yeah. All right. So, gosh, where were we? So, Linyan Shabbat Chumrah. Okay, so we understand that it would be Rabbi Yehuda according to Shabbat, because we want to be strict for Shabbat because it's a Torah rule. Ela Linyan Truma Mahi. Okay, but for Truma's complicated because there's two rules that we have to be worried about: when he can eat and when he can immerse himself. One is rabbinic, and one is according to the Torah. Now, if it's tefillah that he has to immerse himself, that's according to the Torah. And then there is a twilight time for that. So then it should always be strict. It should be a stricter ruling. So why are we following Rabbi Yossi? So elala achilat truma. So no, it has to do with eating truma. So eating truma, not being able to eat truma when you are impure, that comes straight from the Torah. So therefore, that's rabbinic. Since that's rabbinic, we can be more lenient. Okay? We can be more lenient, so therefore we accept in our own law. Well, not so much we accept Rabbi Yossi, we accept that if he immersed in the mikveh during twilight, we can say, okay, we'll be lenient, because the fact that you can't eat until nighttime is actually a rabbinic law, not a Torah law. And there may also be that we want to be a little bit more lenient when it comes to the guy eating. We're going to tell him, no, it doesn't count, so you can't eat for another 24 hours. It would be cruel. So we say, and since it's a rabbinic enactment and not a Torah enactment in the first place, we can be more lenient and say, okay, we will cut you some slack. Even though it looked like maybe there was a star out when you went in the mikveh, we're going to count it as daytime, and you can go ahead and eat. Now, if there were 3 stars, if it was middle of the night, you can't be lenient. But if there was some uncertainty, since it's a rabbinic enactment and it involves you eating, you can now eat.
I guess rabbinic law doesn't mean it comes from rabbis, because rabbis didn't exist at the time of the priests. So how would you have...
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I would say that, I'm not sure they would admit that rabbis didn't exist during times of the priests. There were interpretations of laws. Right. There were sages. I mean, there was some people that studied Torah. But yes, so later there were...
making rabbinic law then.
Yeah. So I would say, look, there's a lot of anachronisms going on. They're acting as if the temple is existing. They're comfortable acting as if the temple's existing, and I really think their belief was that someday the temple's going to get rebuilt, and we're going to need to know what to do. And so there's going to be all sorts of rabbinic enactments about what to do with priests in the temple. So they understood it wasn't practical to their lives at this point, but they were also discussing what's going to happen. And this happened. There are yeshivas in Jerusalem that still do this, that study those laws, just in case.
But if Truma is a rabbinic law, I mean, it's interesting how it even evolved.
No, it's not Truma itself is a rabbinic law. It's when the priest can eat Truma. In fact, the whole concept of Truma is built on the Torah. But this very narrow halachic category is when can the priest eat after being impure. And that is something the rabbis figure out. And they decide, since we figured it out and we didn't get it directly from the Torah, we can be more lenient.
Can we deduct that the only time to go to the mikvah would be during the day?
Yeah, that's very clear.
Should we also presume that
yes, by the way, so this is all assuming the priest was kind of careless, like, hey, just go during the day, and you would save us all this discussion. I mentioned that it's in the priest's interest to go as close to night as possible, just so we can avoid having to go again to the mikvah. But yeah, this all assumes that the priest went during some doubtful time. So what you would prefer, of course, is the priest just go when it's daytime, because it's very clear when it's daytime.
Yeah. Wouldn't they be self-policing? In other words, they would have a sergeant at arms.
Yeah. It would be meaningful to them, just like it's meaningful to us now. Nobody's forcing us, the people to keep kosher. There's nobody forcing us to keep kosher. It happens to be meaningful to us, and that we feel like that's a way that we achieve sacredness. So I assume the priest would feel the same way also. It wouldn't have to be a police. Yeah.
They're discussing all of this because during the existence of the temple, the Kohanim practiced what they practiced regarding impurity, truma. So they already had a set of understanding, rules, practices. So now, after the destruction, they're coming up, this is how you should. It's just interesting.
Yeah, right. You know what? It's probably based on oral memories too, and the rabbis are sitting down and writing things, but they also have received tradition about how it happened. And since a lot of that is not written, it's very hard to know how much they're inventing right now, on the page as we're reading it, and how much comes from hundreds of years. Could be 1,000 years of practice, and because there's so much there was an oral tradition that was passed on from generation to generation. All right, we'll stop here.